Hello, everybody. I'm John O'Loughlin. Welcome to McDuff Lives, and welcome back, Adam Finnegan. It's been too long. Great to have you back.
Thank you. Good to be here, as usual.
All right, man. And I told you before the show, I wanted to start with a quote from somebody who played a big role in my dad's life, and that is General Douglas MacArthur. You have quoted him on the first page of your text in the Sleeper Agent, the rise of Lyme disease, chronic illness, and the great imitator antigens of biological warfare, and preliminary discussion, the art of germ weapons. And under that, you have this. I'm going to just read it. Many have made the argument that a biological warfare agent that can remain inapparent or have long incubation periods will not make much sense. However, this idea can and will be deconstructed and shown to be wrong in order to understand the purpose of a bioweapon that slowly incubates and does not kill but slowly wears down the enemy. We must explain the classification of the two kinds of biological weapons. This will allow one to realize the deeper context and value of strategic weapons as a class of stealth disablers. These agents and the antigen associated with them are the central focus of this book. Attacks with slow acting strategic bioweapons are carried out against civilians rather than armies of the target nation. Strategic attacks involve attacking the population of a nation itself. Strategic biological weapons were brought up in testimony by General Douglas MacArthur to Congress on June 9, 1969, listing the term incapacitating anti-personnel agents. Incapacitating anti-personnel agents. A number of diseases cause virtually no mortality, and the agents of these diseases are generally termed incapacitating. Some mortality might be caused in individuals with pre-existing illness or those suffering from malnutrition or radiation sickness. Q fever, chikungunya virus, and Venezuelan equine encephalitis are examples. And then, furthermore, the desire for synthesizing new agents that do not naturally exist and act as strategic bioweapons targeting the immune system were brought up in the same congressional hearing, noting, quote, within the next 5 to 10 years, it would probably be possible to make a new infective microorganism which could differ in certain important aspects from any known disease-causing organisms. Most important of these is that it might be refractory to the immunological and therapeutic processes upon which we depend to maintain our relative freedom from infectious disease. Well, I'll stop there. That is the tie-in to Douglas MacArthur, who, of course, was in charge of the Japanese occupation after World War II, and his intelligence chief, the very interesting and intriguing Charles Willoughby, who made deals with the Japanese bioweaponeers, the ones that dumped plague onto China and did all kinds of experiments that many of which we probably don't even know about yet. But it puts MacArthur in a position to know what he's talking about. So I just offer that as an introduction to our talk today. What I really wanted to do is to just try to help your book reach the kind of audience it needs in order to make change in our policies. Because all I see, almost wherever I look, are people that are coming up with ideas about turbo cancer or Lyme disease or other chronic illnesses that have to do not with the strategic long-term bioweapons that you write about in your book, but with some manipulation like gain of function or other things that are done in a lab or done more recently. And it seems to me that maybe intentionally or not, that these ideas, as sound as they may seem, are actually major distractions that are covering up the important book that you've written. So, Lana, that's where I wanted to start was, this idea of of strategic biological weapons is not an old, I mean, it's not a new concept. It wasn't invented in Ralph Barrick's lab in North Carolina. It was there, and it's probably been there for hundreds of years in various forms. Enough out of me. How is the book sales going? And I am excited to talk about your new venture, the audiobook version. So anyway, thanks for listening to my introduction, and I look forward to talking with you some more today.
Yeah. So, well, the book's doing well. I don't
Great.
really have. I don't know like the numbers. I just know that it's selling, and
Excellent.
and I'm just about finished with the audiobook, which I will sell on my website, and that's I'm just kind of like going over it again to make sure that it's good, and then I'll have that, and that'll be nice because a lot of people, audiobooks are selling way more than regular books are. Like, so you have an audiobook, it sells a lot better. So I have that almost ready and will be on my website soon. But yeah, the MacArthur talking about creating a new microorganism is like within the next 5-10 years. It's like we had already been doing that. Like Eric Traub had already been doing that, creating a new, doing exactly what he was telling Congress, right? Like that had already been going on. So it's almost like him saying that kind of like it's kind of like well, at least it's a misnomer. It's like they had already been doing that, and sure they could create another one, but they were already, although I'd say the Americans were kind of slow in the game of biological warfare. Like they had a program, of course. It's just that they were always the last to like they were always casting doubt on biological weapons, while other countries like Germany and Russia were really, and Britain were going heavy into it. Of course, Britain seems to be the oldest player in biological weapons. And I talked about, they had seen its worth with smallpox and contagious bovine pleuropneumonia, and they have been attacking us since the formation of America. So that was kind of like Britain's thing. And the way I see the Soviet Union is, of course, like your friend Richard Poe, that British intelligence had more or less created the Soviet Empire. And so I think it's like, but yeah, this is not something new. This is something that's been going on, and the whole link to cancer, chronic disease, and mental illness and neurological disorders. It's all something that these are three different effects of immune tolerance. It's like this is an actual science, right? This was the science of chronic disease. All chronic diseases, while they can be caused by different things, are generally because of an immunodeficiency. That the immune system's been it's not working properly, and it's not, and then there's a whole autoimmunity thing that gets thrown into this. I think there's that a lot of autoimmunity that they're calling autoimmunity is not actually autoimmunity, but virus reactivation from the immunosuppression. Although in some cases there is like an autoimmune thing, I think they like to throw that term on all of the immune tolerance effects too. Because there's no inflammation in some of these diseases, so they can't. So if there's no inflammation, then there's obviously no immune response. So if there's no immune response and there's no inflammation, then you can't really. It doesn't really fall under autoimmunity. Because like fibromyalgia, for example, you can feel it. It hurts like hell, but when they look for it on a scan or something, they don't see any inflammation. There's nothing inflamed. There's absolutely nothing. That's why when I get scans of my headaches, they say the same thing. We can't see anything. I think there's a lot of the immune tolerance spectrum that gets labeled as autoimmunity because they want. Yeah, they want.
I just wanted to go back. Well, go ahead and finish your thought, but then I want to go back to.
Oh no, I was just going to say that they want to say that inflammation is the cause of all disease, and basically immune tolerance shows that that's only half true. There's that whole other side of disease that's marked by immunosuppression rather than inflammation and immune response. That's all I was going to say.
Well, I think that's a huge point. And in my own case, when I talk to my cancer doctor and read stuff, in the literature, what they're looking for is ways to kill the cancer cells,
Mm-hmm.
and, the thing that they're not doing is rebuilding the immune system.
Yeah.
Because in the case of somebody like me that has a compromised P53 gene, which I think came from I think it came from the SV40 and the polio virus. That's my theory. But for whatever reason, it got mutated, and that means that it's not functioning to stop tumor growth. Now, the approach that allopathic medicine is well, just kill the cancer cells. But I got a lot of radiation, and we killed all the cancer cells in my prostate. I think we thought they did, but then 5 years later, don't they show up in a metastasized form in my lymph nodes? And that to me shows that killing the cancer cells is not. Maybe it's a good way to get rid of it initially, but then you have the problem of, well, no, you didn't really, and maybe by what you did, you might have actually caused it to spread. So who knows what would be the proper therapy if these doctors would read your book, because
Right.
then they'd understand that we have a base inside of us, that comes from the many years of strategic biological warfare that you describe, and to have this condition of immune tolerance, which was discovered, as you've documented, back in the 30s by Eric Traub, and weaponized since then. To ignore all this evidence, to me, is to ignore the Hippocratic Oath. It's just like, how can they do that? But yet, well, I'm delighted to hear that your book is selling well. We Marcia and I have worked hard to help get it to more visibility, and I do feel like it's kind of like a personal thing to me, that I want this book to be read by Bobby Kennedy and Robert Malone and all of the people, the famous talking heads, to deal with it. So great. Well, that's my reaction to what you're saying. I think, in my personal case, rebuilding the immune system is what we are trying to do with nutrition, with anti-parasiticals and Allicin V that we get from our friend Scott, which is the garlic extract. I'm using a lot of turmeric right now because there is a report in the literature that says turmeric can repair that P53 gene. So I'm trying to take as much as reasonable every day.
Yeah.
But that's just me. What I'm talking about here is legions, hundreds and millions of people with Lyme disease or with fibromyalgia or unexplicable headaches, everything that's kind of just bringing our country down. If the science and the medical community would pick up your book, then they would see that there's a lot more to work on here than just the acute inflammation, and that there is something hidden, and that thing that's hidden is suppressing our immune systems. It's, I've been reading your stuff now for almost 2 years, and it's pretty obvious to me, but it's got to become obvious to those that are the professional healers.
Yeah. Because this is like, this is an entire science of disease. Like, not only is it a science, it's like a pillar of disease. Like you have two spectrums of disease. The first pillar is inflammation and heavy immune response. The second pillar is immunosuppression and this whole immune tolerance thing. So it's like they're giving us only half of the story about disease. They're treating disease in only half of its form, and they're denying the other half, because most of the people who get that immune tolerance like outcome are told there's nothing wrong with you. We don't see anything wrong. That's why a lot of the vaccine-injured people, they can't seem to get any help either, because a lot of that falls in that realm. Now, sometimes there's also things that can be measured, but a lot of that realm ends up with the immune tolerance realm of effects, and they begged them to get it. The public health begged them to get it in 2021.
Yeah.
And then once they get injured, they go back to try to get help from the people that begged them to get it, and they get thrown to the wolves. They don't even get any help for their disease. And I was just looking at therealpetermarks.com, and it was, I think that's by Del Bigtree or whatever. He runs that site. It's for ICANN, the Informed Consent Action Network. And it's just I mean, we saw exactly that with Lymerix, and we saw it with other ones where they get injured and then there's no help for them. And I said it would be this way. Like, before they even rolled it, like before the people started even taking it, I was like, it's not going to work. It's going to hurt a lot of people. And then once they get injured, they're going to say, oh, sorry, we can't help you. Right. And that's exactly what they're doing. That's why you have React 19 group forming, and they have all these documentaries now about the injured people. There's oceans of injured people who are getting absolutely no help because it falls in this realm of immune tolerance. Yeah, I mean, it's so important that it's like, this is like the linchpin of it all in the stuff that I talk about in the sleeper agent. But it's like, if people actually went through it, and like, especially Eric Traub's stuff, like, some people may not read it, may read like a little bit and then just stop, but it's really about, and the first couple of chapters or the first 4 chapters aren't really like it's not really like the main story. It's just kind of laying out some things. It really starts at chapter 5 when it starts going into Eric Traub. And then what he discovered, it's like this is something so monumental in terms of the science of disease. And it's just, it's amazing to me that they were just able to completely leave it out. And I think they did that because it would have just turned the vaccine science upside down and on its head. And it would have forced a lot of these, the manufacturers and our science they would be confronted with the idea that perhaps these vaccines aren't actually giving people immunity, but are actually burning out the immune system and causing immune tolerance. Because it's like, so it would mean that like you suppress the immune system not to react to a fatal disease. But the problem is that when you burn the immune system out in order to get that effect to that one agent, you're basically burning out your immune system and you'll be plagued by chronic health problems, neurological disorders, and cancers from that point forward. And so everybody's at a different level of immunological burden. And the more you give, the more you take, these are cumulative in effect. So you get one injection, while you may not have these problems. You keep getting them and you keep getting them. Eventually, you reach the point of no return. And you present with that classic immune tolerance. That's when your immune system's really down. And I don't think they wanted to do that. So they basically, they did that whole thing about making it about organ transplants.
Yeah.
And they just completely left it out of public health policy. And it's like something that is real science. And a lot of those high-level public health officials know all about it, but it's something that's not talked about. And it's talked about maybe in biodefense circles, or talked about with that paper, disease tolerance as a defense strategy.
Right.
Which is a really crazy idea if you're going to do that and then not prepare for the coming avalanche of chronic disease, neurological disorders, and cancers. So this is something that we've already, so we can link all three of those things to this one condition, this one science that's already been discovered starting in the 1930s. And we wouldn't have to guess at what's causing this. Like, this is something, like in the whole MAHA, is like getting to the root of chronic disease. Why is it happening? Well, what is chronic disease? It's basically immune tolerance. It's immune deficiencies. And who discovered this science? Eric Traub. If you go back and you look at his like all of his published work, that's what he spends his whole life studying. So it's just really wild to me that this kind of thing can just be completely left out of our science or our public health policy and not be addressed in medicine.
It's amazing to think what type of horrible procedures or medications and chemotherapy and everything else might actually be avoided if we were to concentrate on rebuilding the immune system and avoiding things that destroy the immune system. Now, there's a connection that I see from your work that perhaps is a little obscure to most folks. So I want to just draw this out, is that when they give you these injections, these COVID jabs, inside the jabs is the same thing as we've talked about on previous shows. That is the bioweapon.
Mm-hmm.
So,
actually, with that one, it's actually a piece of virus that's getting your cells to create that bioweapon.
I'm sorry. Yeah, that is a subtle point that I often miss, but it's important. So say that once again.
Yeah, so it's like a little piece of virus that is supposed to interact with your cells to get it to produce that spike protein, right?
And
Instead of having
the spike protein is the bioweapon?
Yeah, instead of having that like in the actual vaccine, like protein vaccines have, where the antigen is actually in it. This is a little piece of RNA, I believe SV40 promoter, and that then interacts with the cells and is able to get your cells to produce that spike.
Wow, that's very interesting. I don't know if you follow Kevin McKernan or not, but
Oh, that's what they call it. That's why they're calling it a gene therapy as well,
because to think of the debate about SV40 enhancer, and
Yeah.
some people are saying, well, that's nothing. That's just a little something that helps that helps the medicine work in some way. I don't know how to describe it. You probably do better, but they have some kind of a way of describing it, that it's harmless. It doesn't do anything. It's just, something that facilitates something important that they need to get done. But the way you just described it, it's pathogenic.
Well,
it's the
yeah.
sheer.
I mean, it interacts with your genes. That's why a lot of people saying it's not a vaccine, it's a gene therapy. It is actually, yeah, gene therapy, and it gets your body to produce that spike, which then that spike also sheds to other people.
Well, stick to the single individual, though. Now you've got a spike in you that's been produced by the vaccine. What happens next?
Well, it's supposed to, call forth an immune response, right? But that spike protein that it's producing hits the receptors that cause immune tolerance. Toll-like receptors 2 and 1 and toll-like receptors 2 and 6 are the combinations that produce this immune tolerance, and that's exactly what these spike proteins stimulate. And so it looks that they were actually trying to create tolerance, or immune paralysis is another one I like to use, in order to get the intended effect that they were going for. Which is it makes absolutely no sense to do that, considering that the virus isn't like that lethal in most people. And it's like, but to do that, to give everybody that vaccine and cause tolerance, would also mean you're going to see the cancer rate go way up. You're going to see chronic disease go way up, and you're going to see all sorts of other problems, the neurological disorders, neuropsychiatric disorders. And so when you, and then you have also the deaths that occur afterwards, like heart attack, stroke, blood clots and stuff. So, those are never assessed really to be whether it's connected to it or not. And most, it would be, that would be something that would be expected with these nasty spike proteins, and especially something like that. That's the kind of thing that you'd expect to see. Is antigen is very, it's like, so it fuses with everything, and it clots, and it sticks to everything. It's sticky, like it sticks to all your joints, and okay, so it can line your cardiovascular system. It basically form what they call bad cholesterol. That low density lipoprotein is like a comparable thing to what these antigens are. And so you may not die from the COVID-19 disease that they've, the the typical pneumonia that you see in the hospitals. Person could die from a heart attack or a stroke and everything, but that would never be included, and it would never show that this person died from the vaccine. And then they could say, oh, well, look, the numbers are going down. We're saving lives, even though they may not be saving lives because people are just dying in a different way. So it's a lot of stuff like that that's how their whole vaccine science is propped up. It's like sleight of hand, it's like, and then they certainly are able to manipulate studies. And there's been many people who've come out about that. Like, I know Brooke Jackson was from the Pfizer. She was blowing the whistle about Pfizer and the way they were skewing the trials, how there was fraud involved in the trials. Well, this is something that's normal. This is something that they do often. This is something that is not like a rare exception. This is something that is, and they don't have any liability. So they could get away. They said we could do that. It's not going to hurt us and it didn't help that they were trying to rush that into production. It was just a bad situation. But yeah, I mean, so you'll get a similar outcome as to other vaccines that did actually use the antigen in the vaccine, like Lymerix, for example. Lymerix vaccine, that was the Lyme disease vaccine. That was on the market for a few years. And it's much like the COVID jab in that people would have to get multiple injections. And oftentimes it was that second shot that really caused that full-blown immune tolerance. Like, a lot of people would get incapacitated after the second shot. The same was happening with the COVID jab. And there was actually articles I remember saying that one person had said that they were shaking so bad they cracked their tooth after the second shot. And they were warning people about the second shot, that it can be pretty brutal. That's exactly what we saw with Lymerix. They pulled that off the market within 2 years. But this one, I would say this one's even worse. But because of that situation in which it was allowed to come onto the market with the EUA, then it's not being taken off the market, and it's going to continue harming people. And, it's crazy because they're giving people COVID jabs and influenza jabs at the same time. It's just a really bad idea for many reasons, but it's like, they think that we can just give them, nonstop, and that it's not going to have that you're not going to run into any problems. I mean, it's crazy because I did remember when I was reading what Ken Alabek had said when he was talking about how, because he had so many vaccines, it destroyed his health.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's exactly what you'd see here. And I'm sure he didn't have 94 like they have the schedules today, where kids from the time they're born to the time they're 18 get like 94 or more vaccines if they follow the schedule.
How in the world can that be?
And yeah, that's why I'm saying it's like, to me, it looks like sabotage. I mean, how could anybody think that's a good idea?
Indeed. I mean, if it wasn't for, everybody has this lab coat fever, I call it, or just the doctor with the lab coat on, is like God. And so you do whatever he says. I think about pediatricians in particular, taking care of little babies and very young children. And, it's obvious that they're making a huge amount of money from the pharmaceuticals that they are injecting into these little kids. But
oh yeah,
A COVID vaccine, as you describe it, is going to generate the spike protein. And
Yeah, and then for a lot of people, it's not shutting off either. They tell people, oh, it's just going to make a little bit of spike protein, then it's going to stop. It's not going to keep making it.
uh-huh.
But people are showing that. I mean, people are, years after the shot are still making spike protein.
I watch. Well, I used to watch Charles CHD. What is it? Children's Health Defense.
Oh yeah,
which was Bobby Kennedy's project until he left to run for president.
Mm-hmm.
And on their feed, on their Rumble feed, it's like every day there's 3 or 4 interviews with somebody who either themselves was vaccine injured or lost a parent or even a child, or has a vaccine injured child. And it's horrible to see how many people have been affected like this, and the people that like could get to Bobby Kennedy and say, hey, look at this book, understand immune tolerance, understand the spike protein, get up to speed. I'm sure that there are people there that have tried. I imagine that people have probably even sent him your book by now.
I hope so.
And but he's the man right now. He's the guy in the position that could actually validate publicly the science you've uncovered.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's possible that also it could. I don't know. I mean, it could also be a sham. Like I don't know. So it's like part of me wonders because it's like the way the direction that they're taking. Like how could they not know? They have to know what's causing this autism. It's like anybody who has a really decent understanding of virology and all this stuff, and a lot of them know about Eric Chob's work. That's the thing. A lot of those high-level people in public health know all about this. So for them to scratch their heads like they can't figure it out, it's kind of like it seems to me like they're putting on a show. And then, I also saw something the other day about RK having all sorts of investments in biotech and stuff. So I don't know. I mean, because in my opinion, it would be like it would suit pharma well if they would send people in to discredit the whole thing by getting people to look at the wrong things, promoting that, and then saying, kind of like they do with the metal adjuvants.
Like aluminum.
Yeah, now well, first it was thimerosal, right? First it was thimerosal, the mercury, and then they took that out of the vaccines, but it kept going. And then they're like, well, it must be the aluminum. And so it's like it's not these metals. It's this immunological process where it's these antigens, but it's what the antigens are causing in the body, that immunosuppression. And once the immune is suppressed, virus reactivation is what is causing the autism. It's like a lot of the virus reactivation is neurotropic or neurotropic, and that will bring on those neurological disorders. So it triggers it.
Let me understand this, though. You're suggesting that there's already viruses in the people that get autism, and that they are reactivated because of the immune tolerance that they get from the disease or from a jab, right?
Like the immunosuppression from a jab. Yeah, but the only thing I'd say is that in some cases, like MMR, which uses 3 live viruses, those can also reactivate. So those are from the vaccine. But in other cases, like where let's say it's just a Hep B vaccine with the Hep B envelope and no live virus, well, those can also reactivate. So you can have the virus reactivation. Those can also cause autism, even though there was no MMR live viruses that were involved, but they can also happen with the live viruses from MMR also, because once your immune system is suppressed and viruses start reactivating, vaccine viruses can also reactivate. And that's probably, I would say that might be a factor in your case with you getting the cold, what seemed like common cold, or was probably coronavirus, and then reactivated perhaps SV40 or something.
That's what I want to explore that, but I can't get the doctor to let me have.
They don't address that stuff anymore, and they're taught not to. So
I think that's the whole thing right now seems to be to throw a bunch of dirt over the SV40 question. Whereas if you look at Ed Haslam's book, I mean, you can see in there that, 30 plus years ago, he predicted this rise of soft tissue cancers that is just exploding. So I keep trying to get people to say, look at this problem as somebody who really worked hard to explain it, and that's Ed Haslam. His work is being ignored and downplayed because it's going to be it's the answer to the test.
Yeah, I mean, so those guys like that are, like RFK's Inner Circle, they're saying we have done very well-crafted studies looking at this autism thing, and we can't find any connection to MMR. So, and he said, we don't think it's likely for any of the other vaccines. So I just feel like we're being played because those guys can't be that stupid. And so I don't know, it just doesn't, I just think we're being taken for a ride because I don't know. I don't think that they're going to allow that. I don't think they're going to allow, because this would bring a major scrutiny of vaccines. This would flip vaccine science on its head. I just don't think they're doing it genuinely. I think they're trying to. I think it's stall tactics. I think they're just trying because they know everybody's pissed. They know there's enough people out there that are pissed about this and that have caught on to this, and they're just trying to kind of, bring us for a little ride, make us think that something's being done when it's not, and they just keep stalling and stalling and stalling, and that's what I think anyway. I think
we have to say Rockefeller. I think, if you look at the Rockefeller Institute and look at the work that Eric Traub did at the Rockefeller Institute, and then you consider that they probably are the most knowledgeable people in the world as to these issues, virology, AIDS, everything else. This is an ongoing, highly financed effort to, I think, understand the human body well enough to control it, manipulate it, and maybe even create an immortal human if that's their dream. But a lot of this stuff that, for instance, Bobby Kennedy now saying everybody should have a wearable. You should have a watch on your hand that will constantly broadcast your temperature, your blood pressure, your breath rate, and whatever else vital signs that they want. And eventually, as Klaus Schwab famously said, once we get them wearing the wearables, then sooner or later they're going to accept the chip in the brain because it's just so much faster and easier. That method of gaining a huge database of human health statistics of these and figuring just learning more and more and more about what it is that makes humans tick Whether it kills people or not is not the issue. It's the in other words, on top of the fact that there is weaponization that's been going on to help governments win wars or to just completely wipe out the enemy population. Aside from that, there's also these investigators, these intellects, these eggheads that don't would rather kill people than not learn the answer to something that's troubling them. I think about Cornelius Rhodes, who went to Puerto Rico and injected people with cancer and trying to see if he could kill them or not. And regretfully could only kill 4 of them, if I recall his note back to the Rockefeller headquarters. These experimenters are, to me, also tied with if you go back to what you were talking about, Great Britain and the creation of the Soviet Union as a place where dark things could happen out of everybody's sight. The creation of the Rockefeller Institute of Medicine, a connection to the Navy and the naval research units that went out and looked for all kinds of horrible things and found, Kuru disease, which now gives everybody prion disease. And I mean, learning how to kill people in 1,000 different ways and learning how the body tries to fight back. It's not just to fight wars. It's also, I think, to control human population generally and to just eventually get a handle on everybody on the planet in terms of how to manipulate their health and how to get rid of them quickly if they get out of line. Depopulation. Do you think that's also a factor in what's going on, in your opinion?
Yes, I do. I mean, because of, like, I didn't think that at first, but then the more I started looking at it, it's like they know exactly what this is doing, and they know that in taking care of this one disease, but instead giving people chronic disease, cancer, and neurological disorders, and shortening their lifespan, and not doing anything about it. It just no. I don't think they can't be that stupid. They're not that stupid. They already have proven that they know all about immune tolerance and they know what it does because they were having those, they were attending those conferences in the 70s. And it's just, I think it's something that was initiated, was a covert depopulation agenda, like that guy had said in that paper that we had talked about once before. Kevin Galilei, I think his name was. He had written several books on it and stuff. I just, that seems to make the most sense considering how illogical all of this stuff is that they're doing. Like, I just don't think they can't play stupid because they know. Like, we can show that the system knows. The Rockefeller, all those people that came out of the Rockefeller Institute, they know how that stuff works. They know all about Eric Chob's studies, and they were the ones. It seems to me that because Eric Chob didn't talk about cancer in his Rockefeller studies, he mentioned cancer when he went back to Germany, saying that it was happening in the Rockefeller Institute studies, even though he makes no mention of cancer in all of his papers from the Rockefeller Institute. So they were probably telling him not to talk about the cancer. They're probably telling him don't publish about that because that's a really controversial thing, knowing that viruses can cause cancer. And so he mentions it when he goes back to Germany.
That's interesting because I always heard that viruses can't cause cancer. No, they
can. It's that whole mitosis thing, and that antigen is a potent mitogen.
Mitogen meaning it splits.
Meaning it causes mitosis, which is a process that has been shown to be involved in cancer.
Right, dividing the cell.
Yeah.
So public policy in so many ways in this country is under the thumb of the Rockefeller and other related powerful oligarchical entities, families, from the oil companies to the ancient aristocracies. And it seems more and more like there's a different world for them than it is for us. And we're just not allowed to have, we can't have nice things. We can't, not only can we not have nice things, we can't even have health.
Yeah, that's the whole incapacitation factor. So it's not only about killing, it's like you get the population so tired and worn out that the hope is that that they're too weak to fight back. And then you got the whole like the wearables thing, and what do they call that whole internet of bodies thing that they're trying to bring online. They want to know everything that's going on with your body all the time, kind of like all your appliances are hooked up to an internet. Well, now they want all the bodies hooked, everybody's biological, make everybody's physical bodies kind of hooked up to the internet.
Yeah. I think that they have digital doppelgangers. They've digital versions of every human now that's in their computer system. So they've got a digital version of me, a digital version of you, and they keep on collecting data about our health and about what we do and what choices we make online, what we're interested in, what are the questions we ask Grok, all of it goes into the Palantir super duper database, and they create this computer model of Adam Finnegan and try to predict. I imagine they even have wagers on what we're going to do next, how long we're going to live, who we're going to, if we're going to get married. This whole thing is like, I've started to feel like, we are the play. We are what's going on stage, and they're sitting off in the audience watching us and pulling levers and puppet strings and things to manipulate us to make things go the way that they want without us figuring out, like in the Truman Show, that it's all a stage. So I don't know if that generates any ideas with you, Adam, but that's been the way I've been thinking of it lately. Is that
I say that I agree, definitely.
So they're so aloof and so highly powered now that they can just sit back and watch us, and I don't know, it's just so creepy.
Yeah, it is, definitely.
Well, you've been getting some more interviews. I'm glad to hear. Who's been interviewing you lately?
I did an interview yesterday with Carol, this woman, Carol Ann from Ethereal Encounters United or something like that. I think that's what it's called. Who else? I haven't really been getting many, but I should once I kind of. I've also been working on the biosecurity ethics and immune tolerance awareness initiative thing. I did one interview with Kevin McCairn.
Yeah.
And I hope to do some other ones. I know there's this guy, Ronald Owens, who wrote a book called Muzzled Truth about the whole COVID-19 vaccine. And I may also interview someone else who wrote a book about chronic disease. So let's see, but I'm going to try to, I'm going to get back to that second book to specifically address just the immune tolerance thing, because that's worthy of a whole book of its own. So I'm just going to keep chipping away. Like I did post some testimony of that I gave for the health freedom movement kind of thing, where there were these health freedom bills that were being put up to try to help, support bodily autonomy and health freedom. I was able to testify at that hearing, and I put that up. Yeah, I'll probably focus on trying to reach out to a bunch of different people. I know there was a couple people that I had in mind. So,
I am also interested in the unpublished chapter that you sent me. Which was focused on coronavirus and the vaccines itself. I know it was just a draft, but it was a long draft, and
it was a very long chapter. Yeah.
When I got through reading it, I was very impressed with it. I thought that this is something I hope you'll develop more. Also, can you?
Yeah, that could be possible too. Yeah, definitely. Because, there's a lot there that's not commonly known by a lot of people. So, and I was predicting exactly what would happen with that vaccine because I knew that it was the same antigen. And so I was like, this is going to be this is like Limerix 2.0, only worse. Because it's like, it's making your own cells produce it, which is a gene therapy kind of thing.
Gene therapy sounds awful scary to me.
And it was talked about in a CIA thing called the Darker Bioweapons Future. They were describing exactly the COVID-19 vaccine, talking about weaponized gene therapy vectors, and that would cause permanent change in the victim's genetic makeup. That would be immunosuppressive and cause permanent change.
Sounds like P53 to me.
It's just, that's exactly, what I kind of said is that it just seems like an enemy has taken over our public health system and is using it to our detriment. And Konstantin Chumakov, he's the one who approved it back in 2021.
It's interesting. I once a few days back asked Grok to tell me about MP Chumakov, who was he, and Grok had nothing but great stuff to tell me about how great MP Chumakov was, the head bioweaponeer for Joseph Stalin.
Yeah.
So they're using things like these AI things to create a narrative that you can't break through. It's another.
If you told it the information from the sleeper agent, then it would start to change its tune.
Mm-hmm.
But they're designed to kind of give you the official narrative until you start making it admit things and things like that. So that's how it is with the AI. I think people might want to kind of, I don't know. I think people are getting too addicted to it.
Generally that's the case. It is fun, and it's fast. One thing about it is if it's something simple like, what's the atomic number of calcium, you just put it in there and it comes to you. There's no question that it's going to be right. But if you ask them, what's the history of MP Chumakov, it doesn't have the information yet. So that's the big limitation. I just put up one note here because I think Brightmore Dinosaur is seconding my idea of giving an analysis of COVID. I think there's a lot of people that want to hear your opinion of in detail, which you already wrote most of. But I think given the 2 or 3 years since you wrote that, it's now. If you can update it, I agree with Brightmore. You would get a big response to that.
Yeah, maybe I will do that. Maybe I'll do that. I may be giving another presentation at the end of July. Somebody asked me to take part in a science webinar, and so I'm working that out and see what happens. It would be something like the presentation I gave, which Nick was facilitating.
Right, right. And that was very excellent. Who was the third person on that?
Oh, I don't remember the name.
All right. But Nick Petoskey, our friend who's
that's the one I did the other one with. Yeah.
yeah. All right. Charles Held wants to know what part of the country does AW Finnegan live in?
Massachusetts.
Massachusetts. Yeah, the home of so much big pharma. It's like you're right in the middle of the beast there, aren't you?
Yeah, actually, you're right.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, Adam Finnegan, for another enlightening hour with you. And I'm very glad to hear you say that the book sales are coming are finally coming through. It's certainly due, and great work as always. Thanks everybody for being with us. Tomorrow at 11 a.m., my wife Marcia and I will do our Friday live chat. So please do join us for that. And thanks again for being with us today. Bye-bye.